You're probably going to hear some cat in the background when they're in heat. They're calling for boys in the yard.
Welcome to Screens of the Stone Age, the podcast where scientists review movies about prehistoric people. My name is Josh Lindell. I'm a grad student studying Neanderthal teeth, and I'm here with...
I'm Kimberly Plomp. I am a bioarchaeologist. I study human health and disease and human evolution.
And I'm Ross Barnett, paleogeneticist, mainly working on lions and other big cats.
And today we're reviewing a movie called Mammoth from 2006. Everybody is shaking their heads and rolling their eyes.
I just can't believe that a movie about a dead mammoth corpse has been reanimated by an alien life form that's intent on feeding off of human flesh was so boring. Like, how? You had so much to work with that idea.
I feel like it started strong because we found this one on YouTube. Did you guys watch it on YouTube?
Yeah.
Yes.
And I watched like the first, it's in like 9-10 minute segments. And I watched the first like 10 minutes and I thought it started off pretty strong in like a good campy way, but then it kind of, got very slow and boring throughout most of it.
I put it up to 1.25 speed or whatever, and it was still too slow and boring.
Well, last episode we watched another movie about a mammoth that was frozen in ice and then when it thawed out, it caused a threat to humanity. And this one is a similar story, but also a very different story.
Which one did we watch last time?
The Thaw.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that was better.
Yeah. Who knew there were so many ways that thawing mammoths could kill you?
So who wants to summarize this one?
I can, but I don't know if I really followed it all that well. So there's this quirky scientist / bad father. And he's at the museum and his like pride and joy is this frozen mammoth that they have still somehow in the ice, but on display in the museum, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
With no discussion on how it's kept frozen in that ice. And then there is a meteor that comes down and hits the mammoth, the museum. The guy survives. It goes on to show us his dad and his daughter, and that's how when we learn that he's kind of a negligent father because he's too into his science, he's too into his mammoth. And the daughter has a boyfriend named Squirrel, I think. And the granddad's pretty cool and really into aliens, and the scientist's dad really hates that he's really into aliens. And then daughter it's her birthday, and because the museum exploded, the dad missed her birthday, so she's angry about that, so she sneaks out with her boyfriend Squirrel. They go to a campfire party in the woods, which really reminded me of high school. Not that I went to very many, but the ones I went to were really fun. I was too geeky to get invited to too many of them. And so they're partying, and then the mammoth comes and breaks up the party and kills the two dance floor predators / potential rapists that were after her. For some reason, they targeted in on her as the only woman they wanted at the party. But I thought it was smart how the movie at least gave us a villain for a moment so that when the mammoth did kill him, it was okay. And then the dad's driving up to try and save the daughter, and and the FBI guys show up, but they're not FBI. They're called like NI something. Because they're like the Men in Black, but they don't call themselves the Men in Black, but that's their idea, right? So it's a man and a woman, they show up and they tell the dad, we think this is alien, this is a bigger thing than what you think. The mammoth is free. So he goes to get the daughter. One of the Men in Black guy gets killed by the mammoth. For some reason, they have to bring his body in the trunk, which I thought was kind of strange, like wasting time that way. Then they drive away for some reason, and then they go to this like 50s diner and order milkshakes, and then they're discussing about so the FBI woman that survives, she says, we have to kill the mammoth, and for some reason this scientist who understands mammoths is the only person that can help her kill them, even though this isn't a mammoth that you're dealing with. This is an alien that just happens to be riding a mammoth, right? Like inside it. This is not mammoth behavior. This is not mammoth specialists would not help you in this. This is alien. Anyways, And what I found funny was that they're talking this entire time, and she was like, well, if we don't destroy this, in 48 hours, the government is going to just wipe out this entire town. And the person is just sitting there making them milkshakes, like listening to the conversation, and doesn't seem to have any reaction. And then the dad is very much like, I just want to get my daughter and leave town. And then finally he thinks, okay, maybe I should save the town. And God, it's so hard to keep track. Then they go to get the granddad, and the granddad and the daughter and the squirrel are driving, and they're at a gas station, and squirrel gets killed by the mammoths. And then the scientist dad has the idea that if they get nitrogen from the fertilizing plant, they can blow up the alien mammoth, even though I don't know how they assume that they can kill the alien in the same way that you would kill like a carbon-based life form on Earth, right? Like there's a huge assumption there that it's going to die that way. Anyway, so then they trap the mammoths. The daughter is brave, does some things, and then they kill the mammoth with the way that the scientist did, and everybody's fine. Oh, but the grandpa dies. He's the one that is the final like person to blow up the mammoth, but then he freezes himself, and then now he's frozen like the mammoth was, and so they're gonna try and reanimate him at some point. And then when it says end, it says end with a question mark, like there's gonna be more. What did I miss?
Well, you missed the part where they meet up with some other mad scientist who shows them this frozen hand, which I believe was his hand, which he removed on his own,
Yes,
and then they thaw it out and it comes to life.
Right. So that was the sheriff and another mad scientist. So they found this hand years before that is frozen and becomes reanimated. So they think it's the same alien life form. And the hand can speak sign language and tells him, like, I want to eat you. I want to kill you. I'm here for destruction. So I guess that's how they practice killing, is they kill the hand, hypothetically.
No, the reason they wanted to use the liquid nitrogen is because they can't kill it, but they can freeze it indefinitely. So their plan was to freeze the mammoth indefinitely with a huge tanker of liquid nitrogen. But then at the last minute, the alien leaves the mammoth and goes into the grandpa. So that's why the grandpa freezes himself, because now he's infected with the alien. So they're keeping him frozen until they can figure out what to do with the alien inside of him.
Yeah, I missed that part. I just thought it just happened to got frozen in the offshoot.
And now the mammoth doesn't have the alien in it, so they get to put it back in the museum. So there's the final scene in the museum where they have the mammoth on display and they're showing the mammoth.
I think I even made it sound more exciting than it really was watching it. They really tried really hard to make it emotional with the daughter and the father and the squirrel and all this stuff, and it just really wasn't.
They also tried really hard to make it funny and campy. But
yes.
it didn't really.
It didn't pull it off.
Didn't really get there. It just ended up stupid.
Yeah.
It has some moments.
It had some good lines, none of which I remember.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh, there are some good lines. I've written down a few.
There was one that, like, he said something like, "Oh, thank God," and then the grandpa was like, "This has nothing to do with God. We have to thank Nike and run." I wonder if Nike paid for that.
He said, "God is for Sundays. Today we pray to Nike. Run."
Yes.
which is neat, because Nike's the goddess of victory, so it does make sense.
Yeah. I actually thought that he meant the goddess at first, and then I realized it was the shoes.
Oh, we're such nerds.
Yeah. But I bet you they paid a little bit for that.
I think they should have paid to have their name not associated with this film. That would probably be where the money is.
I was disappointed. There wasn't enough rampaging mammoth either, right? Like, that's where the money would have been.
And that really was a bit. I think they blew all their effects budget on just a few shots of the mammoth.
Yeah.
It was nominated, according to Wikipedia, for some sort of award for special effects. I think it might have been some sort of daytime Emmy award or something like that. It didn't win.
It was so bad. I would have rather them done claymation.
Yeah. Yeah, early 2000s CGI just doesn't hold up, really.
Especially made for TV movie CGI.
Yeah. Especially if they kind of go all in. I mean, if they'd used like a puppet or something for a mammoth, then that would have been fine as well. Or even
just like two dudes dressed up, then it would have blended to the campy thing and made it funnier, right?
Or just
if they were just doing more of a rampage.
Put a carpet on an elephant. I mean, that would have been...
Yeah. Or where's the Snuffleupagus costume, right? Just a
Exactly.
few minor alterations, and there you
Exactly.
go.
Snuffleupagus always looked like he was out for blood anyway. I was
Yeah.
suspicious of him.
So we could talk about a little bit of the actual sciencey stuff they talk about in the movie, because they have it set in a museum and they do say some sciencey things. So if we want to start off following our format and talking about the inaccuracies, does anybody have anything to start with there?
That's going to be Ross.
Well, I mean, like you said, Josh, it did start off quite strong with when they had the kind of curious scouts going behind the curtain in the museum and finding the mammoth, and them talking about how it was killed by a pathogon. Like what? Which is just them mispronouncing pathogen. So it does bring up kind of ideas of hyperdisease, which were quite current in kind of early 2006. So this is the kind of Ross McPhee hypothesis that possibly some of the end Pleistocene extinctions were due to disease transmission from humans or their commensals to megafauna, which we discussed in previous episodes, talking about things like tuberculosis or leprosy or other kind of transmissible multi-zoonosis diseases. So that was quite neat. But then, straight after that, he's doing like an anal probe on the mammoth to get out the alien spaceship that's in there. So it very quickly veers away from anything scientific. I liked the museum at the beginning. It was clearly some actual real museum somewhere. It had a Dinotherium, which was nice. So Dinotherium is a really distinctive fossil. It's basically looks like an elephant skeleton, except the tusks point downwards, like at 90-degree angle to its chin, and it's a kind of Middle Pliocene to early Pleistocene genus. Huge, like much bigger than modern elephants, much bigger than mammoths, like tied with things like Baluchitherium or Intrichitherium as the largest land mammals of all time. So yeah, pretty chunky boy. That was neat. And I think it also had a mastodon skeleton there as well. I couldn't quite see, and I couldn't be bothered to pause it or rewind it to double check. But it looked like a mastodon skeleton, just given the kind of curve of the tusks and the shape of the skull. And I think later on, it says that the museum is in Louisiana. That's where this is all set, apparently. So maybe it's a creationist museum. Who knows?
Well, I actually looked this one up because I haven't been to Louisiana, but the architecture didn't look like Louisiana to me. The museum looked very much like Eastern European museums I'd been to. And in fact, it was filmed in Romania, at least the museum parts, at the Grigore Antipa Natural History Museum in Bucharest.
You're right.
I didn't actually find that written out, but I found a picture of that hall with the Dinotherium in it, and I matched it to photos from this museum. So
nice.
That's my detective work for this episode.
Good sleuthing. I'm sure they'd have got plenty of juicy tax breaks for filming in Romania.
But the outside of the museum in the movie doesn't look the same as the outside of this museum, so I don't know where they filmed the exterior. The exterior of the town doesn't really look like an American town to me either, so I'm not sure where they filmed that. There's a lot of like BMWs and Jaguars and lots of not really common American cars, so I was trying to figure out if they filmed the exterior stuff in Romania or if just the inside of the museum was filmed there.
Quite possibly.
And the house that they show, like their yellow house a couple of times, doesn't really look like a real house. It looks like a set, right? Because that would be an American house, but I don't think it was a full house.
I think we've got to talk about. Actually, there was the one bit that I found actually quite amusing. I think it probably says more about me than anything else. Was for almost no reason that I can fathom. They have a scene where two, let's generously say that they are two mature people, a couple, are getting busy in a car.
Yeah.
But
They die?
They die, but I think the entire kind of point behind that scene was for something which I find quite quite amusing, which was a fantastic pastiche of the Jurassic Park scene where the T-Rex first appears. And in Jurassic Park, they've got a glass of water on the dashboard in the car, and they can see kind of ripples in the glass of water signifying the arrival of the T-Rex. Whereas in this film, they've got two old people getting on in the car, and they've got a glass with with the guy's dentures in it, and that's got ripples when the mammoth turns up. And yeah, I think that was all kind of constructed around having the glass with dentures in it as the Jurassic Park ripoff. But that did make me laugh, and I thought it was quite funny. And as Kim said, there's lots of quite amusing lines in this. So
Smart lines too. Yeah.
yeah, maybe. So I mean, classic kind of B-movie dialogue, like, we have an alien-possessed mammoth on the loose, and if we don't stop it, the government are going to kill us all. I mean, that's quite fantastic. At the party that Jack and Squirrely go to, and when the dad kind of catches up with them, he says, "If you gave her the weed, I will neuter you," which I find quite amusing.
The weed.
The weed. Yeah. What else? Blind leading the stupid. It's also a pretty good insult. With the kind of Keystone Cop sheriff and his deputies.
When the men in black show up at their house, and the grandfather Simon asks if they need a lawyer, and they say, "Did you do something illegal?" And he's like, "Not today."
Yeah.
That was pretty good.
And then he says in Pig Latin not to trust the government stooges. He was funny.
And there are some good actors in it. I mean, the guy that plays the grandpa, Tom Skerritt, I mean, he's an alien. He's Dallas, an alien. So he has sci-fi pedigree, like, for sure. And Summer Glau, this must be one of her earlier kind of roles, I guess.
Which one? Who is she?
Jack. So she's also in Firefly and Serenity, I think. So also some sci-fi cred.
I think she was in the Terminator series, wasn't she?
Yeah.
I didn't actually watch that one.
I think she's in something, whether it's one of the films, of which there's so many now, or whether it was a series, I don't know. But yeah, there are some fairly decent actors in it.
Maybe that's where their budget went.
Yeah, there's not an awful lot of science in it, really. I don't know. Meteors.
Well, there's a scene when
aliens.
There's a scene when they're driving with the FBI, and they have sort of a quick science info dump where she's asking him questions about mammoths because, like you said, of course, the alien-possessed mammoth is going to act like a mammoth and not like an alien. So maybe, Ross, you can answer these questions and see how well the actual scientist in the movie did. So she asked him if the mammoth died before or after it was frozen.
Well, I don't even remember this section. Maybe I skipped over this. I don't know. But, well, I mean, it depends on the mammoth. But for the most part, they die before they're frozen. So a lot of the mammoth mummies that we have are from young calves, like sub-adult individuals, because they freeze a lot quicker. So, smaller body size, much quicker heat loss after death, which stops them from rotting. And yeah, if they drown or if they kind of get stuck in mud or under a kind of snowdrift or things like that, then that's going to help to bring the temperature down pretty quickly and stop them from ballooning from all the internal bacteria that are inside, which is what happens to most mammals after death. So yeah, although we do have lots of bits of adult mummies as well, but I think for most of the adult mummies, there's a little bit of evidence that they've been predated upon. So they've had their the fantastic Scots word gralach, the kind of insides, the kind of guts and intestines and stomach removed. So things like Blue Babe was predated on. Some of the other kind of bison and rhino mummies look like they've been predated upon and then left once they're frozen and then preserved that way. And that's what stopped them from kind of rotting internally from the inside out. So yeah, definitely death first, then freezing.
Not what he
Well, in
said.
this case, in this case, he says it was frozen alive and subsequently died as a result.
Yeah.
Yeah, so who do we believe?
There's a question that was came up later in the movie, so we'll take a brief jump to there and get back to these other questions. But they at some point mentioned that it was not fully adult yet, because that explains why it didn't have as long hair. So this mammoth is not a baby; it's a pretty big mammoth. I didn't quite understand why a subadult mammoth would not be as woolly as an adult woolly mammoth. Does that make any sense?
No, 'cause they're woolly right from the start. I mean, I think this is clearly a way of explaining how their CGI budget doesn't really stretch to CGI hair,
To hair.
which is notoriously difficult to model.
Hair would have been really hard in 2006.
Yeah, but there's easy
See, that
workarounds.
part didn't bother me because I just assumed that was preservation, right?
Yeah, that would be the easy workaround. Like quite often,
Yeah.
if you think of famous mammoth mummies like Dima and Luba, they don't have a lot of hair left on them because it gets kind of ripped out and slowed off by the kind of freeze thaw in the ice in the permafrost. So yeah, quite often woolly mammoth mummies, particularly the complete ones, don't have a lot of fur on them because it's all in the surrounding ice where it's been kind of wrenched out. So they could have gone that route, and then they wouldn't have had to talk nonsense. Because obviously it's got huge tusks, so it's definitely an adult in the film. It's got enormous tusks.
Yeah, it's got very big tusks.
It was hard to tell with the shitty YouTube thing, but it looked to me, whenever I saw it, that there was also like chunks of it missing and like skin. Like it looked like a zombie,
Yeah,
right? Was that
yeah, it
supposed?
looked like a zombie.
Yeah. So then it would make sense the hair wasn't.
Yeah.
I don't know why they felt they needed to explain that.
So next, she asks him, what type of behavior do they typically exhibit in the wild? Which, again, I don't know why that would matter when it's an alien possessing it. He says that we believe they acted very similar to modern-day elephants.
Yeah, that's pretty good. I do remember hearing that bit, and yeah, for sure. I mean, we know that they had sort of similar numbers of calves at a time as modern elephants. They had similar kind of group structures, we think, as modern elephants. A kind of matriarchal society with, the grandmothers, the oldest, biggest grandmothers leading the herds, and the males being kind of pushed out as they approach adulthood to kind of seek their fortune. So yeah, I mean that's the kind of best approximation we have really for mammoths.
Next, she asks, do they attack?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, well, if we're going to carry on the kind of comparison with modern elephants, then there's not really much that's more dangerous than an elephant on the rampage. The kind of males, when they go into must, are notoriously unpredictable and will tip your Range Rover over or stamp you into a smooth paste if they don't like your face.
So I wonder if that's why they chose, because the alien chose the mammoth, right? They said that they knew it was a UFO because it wasn't a meteor, because it came in from the southwest and then changed direction and targeted the museum. So they think it chose the mammoth. So
but the mammoth also had that weird blue gem up its butt that they X-rayed and then he extracted right at the beginning. I didn't understand what that had to do with anything else. He kept it in the test tube all the way through.
They said it was a rescue mission, so it seemed like the alien was coming to get that thing, except that he had already removed the thing. So I don't know if it had the technology to pinpoint that it was in the mammoth, but somehow not also pinpoint that it had been moved outside of the mammoth when he got there.
I thought
they don't really tie that up very well. When they said it was a
rescue mission, I thought it
was for the possessed hand.
Yeah, I thought that was who they were trying to save, was whoever was in the hand.
Yeah, it's not very clear. Anyway, his answer to do they attack is, oh sure, but mostly out of defense, which is very funny because this mammoth is attacking everybody unprovoked in this movie. It's not defending anything at all. It's just on a rampage.
Yeah.
Well, they said it was feeding off of humans for subsistence, right? And then they're like, well, if it needs to feed, then we can kill it.
Yeah,
just like wild elephant behavior, feeding the life force out of humans by sucking this soul out of them through its trunk.
Oh yeah, it did do that to one guy.
The caretaker at the beginning.
One guy, yeah. They never really did it again.
No. And then when they found him, they were like, it looks like he's had something sucked out of his nose.
So she finally says, anything else we need to know? And he says, well, they were herbivores. And she corrects him and says herbivores, and then her partner corrects her and says herbivores. So what is the correct pronunciation of herbivores?
Well,
I think it just however you say it.
yeah, it doesn't matter. I mean,
Yeah.
it depends whether you're North American or whether you speak proper English.
This movie had a lot of weird things like that.
I don't know.
What I found strange too is that she said that they were their last defense. So her and her partner, and now the scientists, were literally the last defense this town and perhaps Earth had against this alien life form. And the Men in Black sent 2 people.
Yeah. I think it's budget funding. I mean, it's just not on, is it?
Everybody's just getting funding cuts left, right, and center.
Even the Men in Black.
Yeah.
But yeah, they kind of turn up and they've got funky little pew pew laser guns.
Base guns. Yeah.
But that's never really commented on. And they don't really do anything. They shoot the hand with them, but it doesn't kill it. It doesn't
kill the mammoth. Yeah, and it doesn't kill the mammoth. It's like it almost made some. I wasn't sure if it was the gun making those ripples or if the aliens in the hand and the mammoth had some kind of protective vortex thing.
Yeah,
shield.
I mean, there's some very strange attitudes to firearms in this film as well. Like right from the start, the museum caretaker, who's the first victim and the first person to see the reanimated mammoth, he's a museum caretaker, but he also has a loaded pistol in his holster and shoots the mammoth as it comes to attack him. It is Louisiana.
This is just how
true.
America works.
Yeah.
Well, and then there's the lady at the gas
museum
station.
security guards have guns.
The lady at the gas station pulls out this rifle for the people who are stealing gas, even though they left her money. And then she sees the mammoth coming up behind them and is terrified. So she puts the gun down and runs. And you're like,
it's the one thing you would take with you.
Yeah.
We could sort of comment on just like the general way science is done in this movie. Like starting right from the beginning, Kim, like you said, there's a mammoth in an entire block of ice. It's like it's like a 3 meter by like 4 meter tall block of ice that's just in a glass case. There's no indication there's any kind of refrigeration. And it's in a closed off area that says it's under construction. So they're giving the impression that they're setting this new museum exhibit up so people can see this mammoth in a glass case. And the kids sneak in there and see it. And then our main character scientist is sitting there reading a newspaper. And then he has a fun chat with the kids, which I like that part about the idea that kids can sneak into a place in a museum. And instead of really getting in trouble, a friendly scientist will just tell you about science. That was kind of nice. But then immediately after the kids leave, he takes off his glasses and he gets down to his serious science work and he drills a hole into the ice with a DeWalt drill and then sticks in like a, what do you call this, bendy camera? What's the word for this? An endoscope, yeah. And well, he sees a little highlight on an X-ray, which is what he drills in for, and it turns out to be this little alien pellet, which seems to have an entire galaxy inside of it when he looks at it under a microscope or something like that. But like, there's so much to talk about in that, because first of all, you need some kind of refrigeration. You can't just have a big block of ice on display. Second of all, if you're building a museum display, that's not where you're doing the science. Like, you'd have that in a lab to do all that stuff.
Yeah.
And then if it was going to go on display, it would be after all the research has been done on it. And I feel like maybe a lot of people don't realize how much stuff at a museum is not on display, because a lot of these movies, they have things on display and people studying the things that are on display while they're on display. But like, I've never worked in a museum, but like, I've been to like the archives or like the storerooms of museums where they have probably 10 times as much stuff as what they've got on display, right?
Yeah,
most
sure.
of the time.
Oh, most of their stuff's in the back. Yeah, the front, I think the front is like 5 to 10% of their collections.
Yeah.
I've only worked once with something on display, and that was Shanidar at the Natural History Museum. So
Cool.
it's on display, and then instead of moving it around, I just set up a table in the display and right beside the display, and just so it didn't have to move very far. That was after hours.
Because they often, if something that needs to be studied is on display, they'll swap it out or just stick in a little note saying removed for research purposes or things like that. I've worked behind the scenes in a couple of museums, in the Natural History Museum in London and in the Oxford University Museum Natural History. And yeah, it's very much a kind of tip of the iceberg is what they have on display, and the rest of the stuff
Mhm.
is in drawers and sliding stacks and herbariums and you name it, stuff like the where they put the Ark of the Covenant and Raiders of the Lost Ark. That's what behind the scenes of most
Mm.
museums looks like. It's just all the kind of
Yeah.
research stuff is there, because that's the main job of museums, is to be a kind of repository for natural history subjects for the study by scientists. So it makes sense that most of the stuff is kind of catalogued away where it can be easily accessed, easily found, and only
Mhm.
a small bit is on display for the general public.
Yeah, and the general public would not want to see everything that they own. Like they would just get too much and too
Yeah,
boring.
Yeah, the good stuff's on display. But another thing is, especially when it comes to fossils, not everything that's on display is a real fossil or artifact, right? Like,
yeah.
I don't know what proportion of things would be real, but I know at the museum here in Winnipeg, there's a lot of large Pleistocene skeletons. Like, there's a mounted Megatherium, a giant sloth.
Mhm.
And you see those a lot. I feel like that must have been like a really common cast. But I don't think most people who go to the museum realize that's not a real fossil. That's a cast that the museum bought for display, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, a
I
lot of
think
the
it's
dinosaurs are
underappreciated.
too, just because it's too heavy to mount,
Yeah,
a full Titanosaurus spine.
for sure. Especially when
Yeah.
it's essentially rock. That's what dinosaur bones are.
Yeah.
They're rock, so they weigh
Mhm.
a lot and they're huge.
Mhm.
Whereas there are dedicated companies as well, museums doing it themselves, that will produce lightweight casts that are much more easy to mount for display. So the
Mhm.
famous Diplodocus, which used to be in the Natural History Museum in London in the hall, the Hints Hall there, which is also has been on the move for a while. That's a cast, but it's a cast that was funded and given to the NHM by Andrew Carnegie in the early 20th century. So that was one of his kind of philanthropical things, was to make casts of Diplodocus, and he gave one to London, I think one to Berlin, and a few other places as well. So yeah, quite often, as Kim says, the dinosaur skeletons are casts made of plastic or resin. Uh, the Pleistocene mammals, I think more of them are likely to be real because they're actually still kind of bone, which is quite lightweight and easy to mount. But yeah, lots of them are cast too. But when you see things like glyptodonts, those giant armored armadillos, quite often those are real mounts. You can tell. I mean, if you get a bit of an eye, you can have a look and see, are the teeth in the skull, are they kind of obviously separate, or are they part of the same molding? That's how one of the ways you can tell whether it's real or not. Can you see individual bones, or are they kind of fused together? That kind of stuff.
It also helps keep the precious artifacts a bit safer because mounts can fall, things can happen, different lighting, environmental stuff, right? All that stuff can damage things. So
Yeah, just people breathing
Someone
on
can
them.
throw a can of soup on it.
people can put kind of soup on it.
Yeah, or mashed potato, which is the one today.
Yeah, I heard it was cream pie. Was it? I just saw the clip on Twitter.
Oh,
Was it mashed potatoes?
I heard it was mashed potato on the Monet.
Oh, we're talking about different ones. I'm talking about King Charles wax figure at the what's that wax museum? Someone pied him in
Tussauds.
the face.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I'm talking about the Just Stop Oil's Reign of Terror. Now that they've moved on from Van Gogh, they're going to Monet with mashed potatoes.
This was them at Madame Tussauds as well.
Okay.
I'm all
Yeah,
for
good for them.
protesting, but I don't know if it's making a statement that they want.
Have you listened to their statements? Because they're very articulate. I am
Yeah.
actually very
Okay.
on board with this.
Yeah.
They're not hurting the paintings. I didn't hear about the new one, but they didn't hurt the Van Gogh. So
Yeah.
because it was behind glass.
And I think it does make a good statement. What's the point of having paintings of sunflowers if real sunflowers are going to bake under an increase of 2 degrees globally? Yeah.
Yeah, destroy all art. That's my official statement.
Can we quote you on that?
Yeah.
If they started with Mammoth, then I would be fine with that getting destroyed, I think.
Okay, there's another part where he's just sort of offhandedly talking about his research, and he says he's been studying this mammoth for the better part of 5 years, which is just kind of funny in terms of continuity because it's in a block of ice. So, was he studying it outside of the museum setting before they started putting it into the display, and now they've just started putting it into this display, but he's still studying it? And how did he not notice this very, radiopaque blob, which he extracted from it at the beginning of the movie? How did he not notice that for 5 years? But he says that he's been doing X-rays, CT scans, radiocarbon dating, and I can pretty much tell you what the last meal was. And this got me thinking about how you would do these things to a giant mammoth. Like,
Well, you couldn't CT because there'd be no machine big enough.
right? What's the biggest CT machine?
You wouldn't be able to fit that block of ice through it.
No, you'd have to have a custom made, like hundreds of millions of dollars CT machine to fit that thing inside.
Mm-hmm.
What about X-rays though? Can you X-ray something that big?
I think in pieces. I think because an X-ray, like if you think of the dentist, right? Like you don't get into anything at points. So you could do it in pieces like that. Whereas a CT scan, you have to go in, like it's a full body machine thing that you go in.
Like a medical CT scanner is a tube, and it's about the size of a human, and a human can lay down inside. And then you've got like micro CT, which has maybe like a thing about 5 centimeters, like you can hold a couple of teeth inside of it to get really high resolution. But I don't know if there's a custom scanner that can hold something bigger.
You have to go inside something each time, right?
Yeah, like for a CT, you have to fit entirely inside the machine because it's an X-ray that goes in a circle around the entire thing. So you'd have to have a machine that's big enough to hold the entire object.
But an X-ray, I think you'd be able to do just in pieces, like in the same way that you stand there at the dentist and they do it. But I don't think you'd get very good resolution through thick ice like that.
Yeah, that's
I don't know what ice would be like.
Because usually, the ice is shown as being kind of clear ice that you'd have in your cocktail, but that's not how mammoths are found. They're found in muddy ice like permafrost, which is full of stones, grass, twigs, other small mammals. Stuff that's definitely going to be X-ray opaque, and so you're not going to get a good picture if it's still in the ice.
No.
But this one was in very clear, pristine ice, so theoretically they should be able to get X-rays of it, right? I guess ice is less dense than water, so it shouldn't show up any more dense on the X-ray than the actual flesh would, right?
True, yeah.
Radiocarbon dating they should be able to do. That shouldn't be a problem, right?
Yeah, no problem there.
And I can pretty much tell you what its last meal was. That should also be possible if it's frozen, I guess.
Yeah.
But they would have had to open it up, though. Like, it wouldn't be...
I mean, they might have gone...
They'd have to go in and take samples, right?
They could maybe go endoscope just in through the mouth and into the stomach, or they could just look for, like, dental calculus, what's left stuck in the teeth or in the mouth. I mean, it's going to be grass, essentially. That's what mammoths ate. So it's you don't have to study it for 5 years to know that it's going to be eating grass.
But even then, to get into the teeth, you're going to have to get through the ice enough to know that you're getting the grass from the teeth, not from the ice, right? Yeah. You essentially would be doing somewhat of an autopsy.
Yeah. I'm starting to think this guy isn't much of a scientist.
Yeah.
He also describes sort of offhandedly about, I think when they're talking about how they're going to freeze it, he says it's 13 feet high and 17 to 18 tons. And so 13 feet high is about 4 meters, which feels like maybe a big mammoth could be that big. But 17 to 18 tons, just off the top of my head, feels like it should be too heavy for something that size.
Yeah, I mean, elephants are what, 2 to 3 tons? And they're about 10 to 12 feet high. That's definitely an overestimate.
An African elephant?
Maybe the alien part weighs a lot. Maybe it's made of, neutron star mass or something.
It did kind of look like mercury when it was seeping its way into the mammoth. Is there any way for us to assess what kind of mammoth this is? Because there's more than one type of mammoth, right? Some of them are bigger than others. Mm-hmm. The Colombian mammoth was bigger than the woolly mammoth. Is that right?
That's right. So you got woolly mammoths are the kind of last circumpolar mammoth species from kind of UK to Yukon. And then you've got Columbian mammoth kind of south of the ice in North America around the same time. Probably less hairy, but about the same size, I guess. Then you've got the kind of earlier mammoths, the ancestors of the woolly mammoth, things like the steppe mammoth and other things too. I mean, I can't mind if at any point he mentions the date that how old it was. Does he ever mention from his
I'm
radio?
not sure.
Day?
I don't think so.
No, but if it's in permafrost and it's that well preserved, it's got to be woolly mammoth, because that's really the only species that would have been in permafrost forming regions within the time frame that it would still be kind of a mummy. It's my educated guess, anyway.
Another question would be why this small town Louisiana Pleistocene Museum would be the one with the frozen permafrost mammoth, because there's no permafrost anywhere near Louisiana. You'd think that, I mean, I suppose they can move it from farther north to their museum, but I'd expect it to go to a bigger museum like the Smithsonian or
somewhere a bit colder like as well would make a lot more sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not like they found this frozen mammoth locally.
No.
Although they did find a frozen caveman in California in Encino Man.
Yes. Yeah. Why they've decided to say that it's in Louisiana? I mean, it has no relevance to the plot, does it?
No.
No.
Just small town America, I think, is what they were going for.
Do any of the actors have a Louisianan accent or a Southern accent? I didn't notice one.
No.
There was the two bumbling police officers had some vague Southern accent, and the
museum lady at the end, maybe.
Yeah, the museum lady at the end, but not specifically Louisiana. They were sort of, general comedy American South accent. Maybe more Appalachian or Texas. These are not similar accents. I'm not great at American accents.
I found Trog to be more exciting, to be honest.
Wow. Yeah, it was pretty boring. There were a few kind of bits that were quite amusing. I liked that to defrost the alien hand, it had to be on the popcorn setting. That was a nice bit of detail.
I like the sign language of it. I want to eat your flesh.
There are a lot of very innocent people that die violent deaths for no real reason in this movie, sort of similar to Trog.
Yes.
That poor security guard right at the beginning, he's like an old guy and he walks in and clearly his job is really slow because he's like, checkers or chess today, doctor? And he's like, no games today, I'm too busy. And then he realizes he forgot his daughter's birthday. But then the mammoth comes to life. He tries to do his job and shoots at it with a gun, and he gets his soul sucked out. And why did that guy die? Why'd you make that guy so nice if you're going to kill him?
Yeah.
There's also another part. So we didn't really talk about the conspiracy mindedness of the grandfather character, but because it was the granddaughter's birthday, for some reason, somebody inexplicably hired a man to dress up as a gorilla and deliver her a birthday message. He shows up to the house where only the grandfather is home because the daughter is at the bush party. But then the mammoth also shows up and somehow ends up impaling this guy on one of the grandfather's many, many antennas on the roof of his house for his alien research.
Mm-hmm.
And the grandfather comes out and finds this monkey man dead on the lawn, and he thinks it's an invasion of alien monkey men.
Well, he loads the
guy. He loads the guy into the car and then drives it into town, and then later, randomly, he crosses paths with his son while he's pulling this body out of the car. And as he pulls it out of the car, the mask falls off, and he puts his hands up in the air, and he's like, the monkey's a guy.
Yeah. And then they all walk up to him and they look at this body and they're like, okay, well, whatever. Anyways, there's a mammoth free. Nobody even mentions anything. The reason why he assumed it was alien was because the cable went out and the phone wasn't working. So to him, that meant alien invasion.
But he wasn't wrong.
Fair, No, I know it was, but that's very.
But no connection to the very clearly gorilla suit.
Yeah.
Like,
No, I know.
The right answer for the wrong reasons.
That was another part that I thought was funny when the electricity first went out when they were watching the movie. And he went into the back and he looks at the breaker system. He's like, everything looks normal. Then he's like, did I pay the bill? That's what I think every time there's a blackout or something. I have to look around to make sure everybody else's electricity is out.
Oh, I've just noticed in my notes something that is almost interesting. But they give the name of the sheriff as Marion Morrison at some point. The sheriff that's the kind of antagonist with the scientist guy. Marion Morrison's the real name of John Wayne.
Really?
Mm.
That's another thing is this film is just full of pop culture references. The grandfather seems to be really interested in old sci-fi movies, and they have them starting with the daughter for her birthday. They're watching some old movies in an old theater. And then they keep making references, like the reference to Jurassic Park, like you said. They mention a lot of movies by name. They mention the War of the Worlds. Mm-hmm. Actually, one of them says it's like the War of the Worlds, and then I think Squirrely says it, and then Jack is like, I hope you're talking about the 1953 original, and then he's like, actually, I was thinking about the remake, and I'm like, 1953 original? I guess the original movie, but
yeah.
If you're talking about the War of the Worlds original, you can get like 3 levels of original farther back than that. The movie's even like referential towards itself, because at the opening scene when you have the museum announcer describing museum exhibits, they say it was founded in 1879 by Armand Kevorkian. Armand Kevorkian is the name of the visual effects supervisor on this movie.
That's cool.
Mm-hmm. Well, what is our final assessment of this movie then?
You know, I love cheesy, bad horror movies and action movies like Sharknado, giant, what is it, like Mega Shark versus Giant Octopus. Like, I love those movies. This was what I was really hoping this was that movie, but it just wasn't. It didn't have enough. They tried to make it too emotional. They should have leaned more into the cheesy violence, right? Yeah. They should have went more horror movie than coming of age father-daughter thing.
It was a sort of B movie trying to be a B plus movie, whereas it should have been a B movie being a B movie. It shouldn't have got ideas above its station.
Yeah.
This movie has 3.6 out of 10 on IMDb right now. Is that the worst one we've seen?
No.
It can't be.
I mean, is it the worst rating we've seen?
For a horror movie, that's actually pretty high on IMDb.
If we're looking at rating, has anyone fixed Neandergen, or is it still implausibly?
It's 7.5 now, but that's because I rated it.
How do you rate it? Neandergen.
You need an IMDb account.
Oh, that's a lot of
but
work.
all you got to do is just click the stars.
Trog's 3.9.
You know, I think that's fair for Trog.
Yeah.
I would have given this one a 2.
I've been thinking when we get up to maybe like episode 50 or something, we should do a special episode where we do a tier list of all the movies we've reviewed and put them all, rank them all conclusively, so we can get a sense of how what we think about them relative to all the other movies we've seen.
Are we each going to have our own list, or do we have to come to a consensus?
I think we'll just come in cold and we'll just go through our episodes one by one and come to a consensus for each one.
That's very meta.
What do you think?
Yeah.
Sure.
I like it. I'm just having a quick look through to see which ones might have a worse IMDb rating. God, a lot of these have a much higher IMDb rating than I would have imagined. Hang on. Encino Woman.
Yeah, one of the things I'm learning from this podcast is not to trust the IMDb ratings all that well.
Encino Woman is 2.9 on IMDb.
Okay.
So that's possibly the worst.
It was a pretty bad movie. I don't know if it was the worst movie,
I think it
but
might
it was
be.
pretty bad. Neandergen was the worst, I think.
Oh yeah, for sure. But until we kind of pile on with some actual kind of realistic reviews, it's going to still be.
Oh, you mean on IMDb?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So of all the ones I've looked through, Encino Woman has the lowest IMDb rating at 2.9. That's not something we need to aim to beat. I think I'd be quite happy with not reviewing anything lower than 3.
We should make our own ranking system. So instead of stars, we should have like
Hand
mammoth
axes.
heads or something. Or hand axes, yeah. Saber teeth.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Or we could just make it completely arbitrary and be like, this one's 3 Neanderthals and a mammoth.
Yeah.
But that one is.
I give this 3 hand axes and a microlith.
If you've been enjoying Screens of the Stone Age, get in touch with us. Follow us on Twitter at SOTSA_podcast and on Facebook at SOTSA podcast, or send us an email to screensofthestoneage@gmail.com. Screens of the Stone Age is supported by the Paleoanthropological Society of Canada. Find out more at pasc-scpa.ca.